This is the Michael Bryan Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show, and I am joined with Sangeeta Waldron, who's a multi-award winning communications professional, which is a lot of long words, but she specialises in climate change, and we are discussing all things climate change and what we can do about it, if anything. So, Sangeeta, thanks for joining me.
Well, great to be here, and thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And I thought we would start with a little bit about why you chose climate change. What led up to this moment today?
Well, I've always been interested in the planet, nature, our ecosystem, right from being small, from as young as 10. And when I was 10, I remember there was an advert in the paper when Greenpeace was looking for local reporters, and I signed up and became a local reporter for Greenpeace. And I think my real relationship with nature began when I was about 17. And at that time, I was living in India, in the Himalayas, and I could see the impact of climate on the local ecosystem. So back in the sort of 80s, late 80s, there were forest fires because of intense heat, and you would see all the wildlife fleeing from the forest coming into the town. So that was my first understanding about climate and nature, and that brought me to where I am today.
It must have been quite surreal for you to actually see the effects of climate change because most people they see the temperature going up and in some parts of the world that's considered a good thing. So it's interesting that you're seeing the negative effects firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 9 years of my life in India, and during that time, I understood how precious certain resources are, which we take for granted here in the UK, such as water. And sometimes in India, you will have water cuts that can last for days because water is in short supply. Electricity, you'd have power cuts. So you'd have a power cut, so the farmers could use that capacity of electricity for their farming to harvest or whatever the farmers needed. And it really made me think about how precious these resources are and how people take care of, when it rains in India, you try to harvest that rainwater to water your garden or for anything that you might need. Whereas here, we don't really do that. And I was watching this morning on BBC News, and we were already talking about a drought happening this summer in this country. So, but I was experiencing these things in India, sort of 20, 25 years ago. So yes, it's very firsthand. And I think what's also surprising, or not surprising really, but when you go to the global south, so countries like India, Africa, Pakistan, um, these are countries that are on the front line. Even some of the smaller islands, such as Barbados, the Caribbean, they're on the front line of climate change, where those people are experiencing intense heat or intense weather patterns. And you don't really find lots of climate deniers there as you do here in the West and in the UK.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? Because if you think of some parts of the world where it's almost unlivable right now because of climate change, it makes you think that the people that are affected by climate change are the ones that are less skeptical, more prepared to do things that make a difference. And it makes me think that it's not necessarily about the future generations, it's about the people that are suffering with this today as well. Like it's almost like it's both, not just one.
It's 100%, it's both. So it's what's happening now and then what's going to happen in the future, because it's going to affect future generations for sure. They're not going to have the resources. I'm talking about natural resources that we have. Um, Landscapes are going to be changing. Uh, last year, well, a year and a half ago, I spent my time researching for a book. And during that, and I have a chapter on food in the book. And one of the things that I discovered is that because of the weather patterns and how climate is changing, certain countries are no longer going to be able to be producing what they do produce because the climate is going to change. And that sort of works for here in the UK. So there is going to be a drier climate here in the UK. So we might be producing, which I discovered, more wines, more grape varieties. So and that changes food production, and that will change for the next generation for sure.
It's interesting that you bring that up as well, because there are a few people that will say, well, the planet will be fine even when climate change gets more intense. The planet's going to be okay. It's us living on this planet that are going to suffer. And then when you bring up that we're producing different fruits and vegetables because of the climate, is there not an element of we'll find a way, or do you think there will always be a limit when there's nothing we can do about it now? We've let it go on too long.
No, I mean, there is always solutions, and there are solutions, and there are very clever people all around the world, um, not just scientists, but local people doing amazing things, finding solutions for their local communities, for their local ecosystems. So there is a lot we can do, and while we can't reverse the past is done. There are lots of things we can be doing now that will change or improve the future. And so some of the big tech solutions in renewable energies is some of the things that are having an impact. But there are the everyday actions that you and I can be doing that will make a difference to people. So it's simple things such as, when you're brushing your teeth, turn off the tap, don't let the water run because water is precious. When you're cooking and you're steaming your vegetables or you're cooking with your pots and pans, put a lid on your pot because that saves energy and that's better for the environment. Just little things. If you can walk somewhere, walk. Don't always think about taking the car. And if you can use public transport, nothing like it.
I guess that's a amazing place to start, because if you think of the little things that the average person can do, how much of a difference does it actually make? Because when you think of recycling, when you think of walking instead of taking the car or the train, that sort of thing, it becomes there's a laundry list of little things. How much of a difference do they actually make?
They all add up. People always ask me, what can one person do? Well, one person can do a lot. One person can create change. And the change that you're making, when it adds up to the next person and the next person, it creates a ripple effect. And that ripple effect then creates a tsunami of change. And I can just give you one example of somebody, just one person. He is a bus conductor in India, so not very well off, not living a wealthy lifestyle. But what he's done is dedicated his life to planting trees, not just planting trees, but then looking after the trees once he's planted them. And he's got local school kids involved to help him. And over the last 30 years, he has now planted over something like, I can't remember the statistic, but it's something ridiculous as over 60,000 trees because now he's got other people involved and that's created a whole forest and that has changed the ecosystem. So I'm not saying that everyone can go and plant trees, but if you just look at one person, a bus conductor, living his life, got a family, but he dedicated, to spending time to plant trees and he's made a difference. So I also saw this morning, just by maybe taking that minute off your shower time, or switching off the tap when you're brushing your teeth, that can add up for one household. I think that can, if I remember correctly, something like 4 gallons of water per day. So that does add up. That makes a difference. And it saves on your bill too. So it's a win-win.
It makes me wonder actually, how are we still struggling with this? If we're doing all of these little things, and I mean, I'm a bit more conscious now with the little things that I'm doing, how is climate change still one of the biggest crises that we're facing? I think I read somewhere that it's almost like war and famine, and I think AI
Yeah.
is even on this list now of the little battles that we're fighting. How is climate change still a problem?
It's still a problem because of the fossil fuel companies. So fossil fuels are all the oil companies, and they're very wealthy. They fund a lot of governments around the world. They fund a lot of election campaigns, so they get their candidates into power. And then once they're in power, they make laws that profit the fossil fuel companies. And that's one of the reasons why we're still battling, and it's, sort of like a top level down. But what we're finding is grassroots communities are changing things, and now it's from bottom up. The other thing I would say is, we don't really appreciate how much the fossil fuel companies um, permeate into our lives. So things such as plastic bottles are made from petroleum, which is fossil fuels. So they own a lot, and they kind of dictate a lot of our lifestyles. So until we change that, and until we sort of veto that power of fossil fuel companies, things are not going to change that quickly. And a great example of this is the recent elections in America, where we've seen a new administration come through. A lot of Trump's campaign was funded by fossil fuel companies.
That's an interesting topic, I guess, because it becomes the individual person, like you or me, that are doing our little bit. It doesn't seem as helpful when you've got plastic bottles being created at the millions or billions. It just seems a bit like a raindrop in an ocean sort of thing. I know we can make a difference if we all do something, but how big is it when we're ice skating uphill every day?
Well, we can make a big difference, and we can make a big difference by voting. So it's about knowing who we are choosing to be in power. So that's our birth, most countries around the world, we have the right, citizens have the right to vote, and we shouldn't take that for granted. We should use that power because that makes change. And and also the other thing we should be also doing is fact checking everything. So everything we're reading, fact check it, because that makes a difference. Once we are aware of the authentic information, then we can also create change and make change. So everything's connected, nothing's standalone. Everything is connected, from our voting power to our actions to the choices we're making. And for us to be informed, we need to be authentically reading and authentically fact checking everything. So it's not a small drop in the ocean. We can make change. And there are certain countries in the world where citizens have made change, like Costa Rica they were suffering from complete deforestation because of previous governments. And now they put laws in place over the last 5 to 6 years, and they've rebuilt or they've regrown their forest areas. So so when we work together, we can make positive change.
That makes me think as well. If you think of the idea of communities coming together, and I know we've grown almost beyond the indigenous side now, where we're all helping the nearest 10 people, let's say.
Yeah.
But if there's a way of working together, what are some of the best ways that we can do that? What are some of the best ways that we can help each other out instead of trying to think almost too big? I think
Yeah.
there's a chance we could go small as well.
Oh, 100%, Mike. And there's nothing like being involved with your local neighborhood, your local community. And that's just simple things, really simple things, such as, well, find out what is happening locally, get involved, pick up litter. Pick up your own litter. Don't chuck your own litter. If you see something that's, outside the bin, pick it up and put it in the bin. Um, be involved in your local litter pickups. That makes a big difference to the local area. Lots of local areas now have tree planting schemes, and also being involved with local schools. They also have lots of green initiatives. Go in and talk to the local students about climate. Get involved with your local climate hub. There is so much happening at local level. I mean, I live in North London and in a borough that's very urban, but we have so much going on. And you can be involved in different things in it, and also getting to know your neighbors just makes a difference. Um, and that spirit of community, when you feel you're part of something, you want that something to be better. And it could even just be being involved in your local park, being involved in the local litter pickup in your local park, being involved in my local park. You can go and when they have tree planting, they're looking for volunteers. And it's just good to be outdoors, and being in nature really improves your mental well-being as well. So there's so many things you could do locally.
Do you ever find that it's like you either have it or you don't in terms of this responsibility? Because there will be people that will wipe their hands of it, so to speak, and just do whatever because they don't think that they can make a difference. And then there are people that will do all the things that we're speaking about today. Do you find that taking some responsibility yourself personally can have this ripple effect? Because some people simply ignore it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I do believe it's everyone's responsibility. We're all accountable. And nobody's perfect, right? Nothing is perfect in this world. But I think we need to, we need to be involved. And we also need to think about the next generation that's coming, because they are going to be the ones that will be living with what we've created. And I personally feel I have that responsibility for the next generation. And you raised something quite interesting. You mentioned Indigenous communities um, earlier. And Indigenous communities around the world, they have something, especially in America with the Indigenous Native American communities there. They have something called seventh generation thinking. And that means in those communities, when they make a decision, they don't just think about, is that decision going to impact us now? But how will that decision impact generations that will come in that seventh lineage, in 7 years? So they think ahead. And some of that now, that seventh generation thinking is now coming into the West. And in fact, in Wales, they're using that thinking in decision making and whatever they're planning and creating for the future. So yeah, and in Japan they're also using that thinking. So we all have we all have that choice, and we have that power, and we are accountable. And it even comes down to something like this, it's purchasing power. So when you're buying that £2 or maybe £4 t-shirt, £2 is probably stretching it a bit, but when you're buying that very cheap t-shirt, there's a cost to that. There is somebody who has probably picked that cotton because they are bonded in labor, and most possibly it's child labor. So it's bonded child labor. So it's for us to be aware, to think, to be informed, and that will make us accountable.
Do you find then that you can end up almost overanalyzing things? Because I'm curious as to where people can go for this information. It seems like it's a good idea to try and find it, but then with misinformation and information being behind closed doors, so to speak, it can be so hard to actually recognize what's the truth and what's actually happening.
Yeah, so I would say if you're looking to find out what's happening locally, go along to your local authority, your local borough, your local council rather, and find out what's happening. Or you don't even have to go there, just check onto their website because they have lots of good information. And they'll also have list of local organizations. So you might be interested in trees, or you might be interested in wildlife. You'll find that information of what's going on. You might be interested in doing upcycling, swapping some of your commodities. So your local council is a good place to start. Also, there are so many charities here in the UK, and they're all governed by the Charity Commission. So you're going to be getting authentic information. You know that they're legitimate. So if there's something that you're interested in, maybe butterflies, maybe bees or pollinators, find a charity that speaks to you because they will have lots of activities in local areas. Lots of charities have local hubs. So, the other thing is Google is your friend. Add a we can research and we can fact check things through Google, through so you know what you're reading. You know that it's going to be authentic, especially if you start at places like not-for-profits, charities, your local authority. And if you're living in London, the mayor's office has great information of what's happening around the city. So if you live in a bigger city, find out from what's happening from your local mayor, from their website.
I'd love to know a little bit more about this seventh generation thinking as well, because I wonder how can someone do that? What sort of questions are you able to ask? How do you have this conversation when there's obviously the flip side of that is unintended consequences where you're more damaged by what you don't know? How does someone go about doing this?
So different, I mean, lots of, not lots, but a few companies now are using this thinking in their strategies and decision making. So first of all, you'll have a collective of people that you will bring together, and these will be people that have it's a diverse group of people, and it would be of different age groups. So that's how you'll start. You'll have a collective of voices, different age groups, it's diverse. And so if it's, I don't know, you're planning some kind of building, maybe if we use that as an example, you'll discuss that and where should it be built and what will be the impact of that building on the local ecosystem? What will be the carbon footprint of that building? So this group together, they'll discuss that. And, it's very democratic. And then they'll think about, right, if they build this building and they're going to build it on a green belt, what does that mean for the future generations who are going to come? And what will that mean for them? Would it mean less pollinators? That means less bees, less butterflies. If they're going to be building on a green belt, will that mean that they're chopping down trees, which will be needed for that local environment? So there's different ways you'll plan and you'll discuss what changes you're making into your local area. And that collective will then decide whether they're going to go ahead with that building or not. Or maybe there's another way of building that on another place. And maybe that's a brown filled site. And that would be better for the coming generations. So that's the basic principle of it. But the basis is to ensure you have a diverse group of people. in that conversation, and they need to be young voices that are part of that conversation because the young will bring a very different perspective and a different energy. And sometimes when we are older, and even though we might be a little bit wiser, we don't really see what's ahead. And that's why the young voices are part of that decision making.
Are there a list of, I guess, questions that you could ask yourself? So if someone listening wanted to have a bit more of a legacy mindset, a seventh generation thinking mindset, thinking that far into the future, how can someone start to think that way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it depends what's your interest. What do you want to change? Do you want to plant a tree somewhere? It can be as easy and simple as that, because that tree for years to come will have an impact, a positive impact on that local ecosystem. It could be as simple as planting, if you've got a garden, planting flowers in your garden. If you've got a garden, it could be as simple as not mowing your lawn for May because we're down on our pollinators, and pollinators are necessary for food production. Um, and if you don't have a garden, think about a window box, planting something in there. If you're thinking of shopping in Primark or any of those fast fashion shops, think about you buy that top, you're going to maybe wear it, I don't know, a couple of months this year, and then you're going to chuck it. Well, think about that top is going to be in landfill, and that top is going to take longer to biodegrade than you are. So that top will probably outlive you because cheap tops and cheap clothing is full of polyester, all those things that don't sort of decompost quickly. So it's simple things, just thinking about, do you want that top to outlive you or do you want to outlive that top? Do you need it? Can you repair it? Can you wash your sneakers? Do you really need them? Another pair. It's just all these things change your mindset. And, maybe it's not about shopping or planting, but it's just about being in nature. And have you connected with nature recently? Have you stepped into the garden and just sat there? Have you walked to your local park? Have you done a local walk? Because when you walk in nature, when you are in nature, and science has proven this, it actually changes your mindset and it helps your well-being. And when you connect with nature, you think more about her and what you want to do for her.
I found as well, just from the odd exposure to being outside that I get, is that I also find that I appreciate things a lot more. And if I'm fortunate enough to go out at night time when there is no light pollution and things, and you can see the stars, you get this renewed sense of being able to appreciate it, being able to know that it's still there. And sometimes I'm surprised it's still functioning given everything that we do to it.
Yeah, and that's the most incredible thing about nature. And scientists have proved, they've done the studies, they've done the research, they've proved how good nature is for us. And nature is so calming, just going out when you feel a little bit stressed. I know sometimes if I'm feeling stressed, I'll just have to step out and walk, and you just feel so much better. And there is this piece of research that was done in America probably 10 years ago now. And I love this sort of research because it says that on this planet, if we continue doing what we are continuing to do, nature will be destroyed. It won't have a chance. But if we disappeared, everything would thrive on this planet. Everything would just be so much better. It would flourish. And this research was done in relationship to bees. So if bees died, we would die within 5 years because we wouldn't be able to eat anything because none of the crops would be pollinated or be able to grow. But if we disappeared, everything would just flourish and thrive. So I think that just shows that we are very disconnected from our relationship with nature. And I'll just say this one other thing. When I was writing the book, I discovered how important sea life and the ocean is to everything we're doing here on land. And in the ocean, nearly every species has a role to play and it acts. So humpback whales have a purpose, and their purpose is to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and take it down to the bottom of the seabed, and they secrete it out into these pellets. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. It makes me think as well, after what you said then, that it's almost like we're the problem and we're trying to solve the thing that we're creating. The idea of whales helping with, let's
Yeah.
say, climate change or greenhouse gases, that sort of thing. We need to understand this a lot more because if that's the case, then what do we not know that is helpful?
Yeah.
What is also out there that can make a difference?
Yeah. And I mean, just going back to this about whales, humpback whales, that's their job. That's what they do. But because we have overfished or we've left, plastic pollution, um, humpback whales, their populations have reduced. And because of what we're doing on land, we're affecting what's happening in the ocean. So now in the ocean, there is something called marine heat waves. They don't happen every year, but they are happening. And what they do is they create like stifling heat in the ocean, so the currents can't move. So the fish can't swim through the currents because it's just sort of this, there's no flow. And so this is affecting the humpback whale population as well. So they've decreased. But it comes back to what I said right at the get-go, is that we need to be better informed. We need to be better informed about the choices we're making. We need to be better informed about who we're choosing to govern us. We need to be better informed about how we're spending our money and what we're spending our money on and who we're spending our money with. And, information with that information, we can make real changes and we can make informed changes as well.
I guess the question then becomes, what do we want to leave behind? What do we want our legacy to be? Now, I know that that's the title of your book, Sangeeta, so I'm curious as to what you want your legacy to be. How do you answer that question?
I think well, I know what I want my legacy to be. And I just want to say something just before I answer that. We think of legacy as something when we get older, maybe when we're in our 30s, 40s, we might, and 50s and onwards and upwards, we think how we're going to leave the planet. But sadly now, legacy starts much younger. Our legacy is starting as young as 14, as soon as we're old enough to make an informed choice of what we're buying, what we're doing, that's when our legacy is starting with regards to the planet. And what legacy do I want to leave? Well, right now, my legacy is about talking about the climate crisis. I want to talk about it and I want it to be as easy for people to understand. It's not complicated, it's our relationship with our local ecosystem. And that can be as something as simple as your garden. That relationship is so important. And that does have an impact, that has an impact on your neighborhood, on your neighbors, and all the great things that, happen in our communities. Because when we don't, so for example, this is again, I'm just kind of going off tangent, but when I say your local neighbor, if you decide to put an astroturf down, the fake grass, you're changing the local ecosystem in your local neighborhood because that fake grass does not attract the local bees, the butterflies, or the birds. and you're also destroying the earthworms, and that has consequences for all your your terrace of houses and their gardens, because that will change that local ecosystem. So I just want people to be better informed about the choices they're making, and for us to keep talking about the climate, because it's happening as I speak. The climate is changing. Um, and already here in the UK this summer, droughts are predicted and forest fires are predicted. So the more we talk about it, the more we know what we can do. So that's my legacy, to talk, because as you can tell, I don't shut up.
I wouldn't go that far, Sangeeta. But it seems like you need plenty of practice anyway, because there's a lot of voices that are trying to ignore you, I guess you could say, and trying to ignore the fact that things are getting hotter, weather is getting more intense, and I mean the idea of the UK having forest fires when I've only ever heard them in places like the Amazon and
Yeah.
California. It's a weird situation when things are getting intense. What do you think it's going to take for us to really get the message then? Are we going to have a fire down the road before we do anything?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's when it reaches our doorstep, and it's on our doorstep. And it's like anything, isn't it? When it impacts us, then we kind of think, wow, what can we do? Or how are we going to solve this? But we shouldn't let it come to that, because we're talking about future generations. We're talking about, you know, the children that have not yet been born. It's kind of that's who we're talking about. And we can still do something for them. We can still make a difference. And there's so much hope, there's so much we can do. And hope is alive, and belief is alive and well. And, you very kindly referenced my book. And I spoke to scientists when I was writing this book, and the scientists have hope, you know, even though they're seeing some of the data on a daily basis of what's happening with regards to the planet and temperatures, they have hope. They believe we can make, if we all collaborate, work together, we can make the changes that everyone needs. And some of the countries in the world, like Africa, have the solutions. We just need to rethink our thinking and rethink how we collaborate, and we shouldn't be in our echo chambers. We should be talking to everyone, working together. And that's what communities are made of. That's what that's what makes communities really strong, is when people get together, work together, and there's nothing wrong in being a nosy neighbor.
Well, I have one final question for you, Sangeeta, but before I get to that, how can people grab the book? How can people find out more about you and enter your world if they want to?
I would love people to buy the book if they feel inclined. So you can go to any bookshop on your high street, W.H. Smith's, Waterstones, um, and find it. If it's not in there, please order it. You can order it online. You can order it from Amazon. There are other good book online retailers as well. The book is going to be available in the US uh, from the 27th of May. So it's widely available. And if people would like to connect with me, well, I'm on that big platform called LinkedIn, same name, Sangeeta Waldron. Connect with me. Um, Google is your friend, research, put my name in, and you'll find me. And I'm an open networker and love connecting with people.
And the final question for you is if you were on the top of a mountain wanting to get the word out to everybody, so imagine these sentences or paragraph is going to be broadcasted to everyone in whatever language that they understand. What would you want to impart on them? What final words of wisdom would you want them to know?
You can make a difference. That would be it. You can make a difference.
thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Sangeeta, thanks very much. I have enjoyed the conversation and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.